Hello again. Let's talk about good essay intros and conclusions. I gave you some good basic information on page 130 and 131 where we were talking about how do you put an essay together. You know, you have your opening paragraph, then you have your body paragraphs, and you have your concluding paragraph. And a lot of people know what they want to say. They have a hard time getting this paper going. And so I gave you two basic things on pages 130 and 131. One's called the academic opening, and the other is called the grabber. And so I'm going to just leave that alone because we've talked about that before, and you can read that material on 130 and 131. I wanted to focus, though, on page 99 today. I thought this was really interesting. I went to some magazines and just looked at the way magazine articles got started. These are people that get paid. They get paid pretty good money to write these articles, and they get printed and published all over the place. So I wanted to see what were some of the tricks they did, if they did any of the same tricks that we were talking about in those other pages. So if you look on page 99, I'm just going to do a few of these, and I'd like you to look at them yourself. But look at number 1. Even on the best of days, it can be tough to get out of bed, and on cold, dark mornings, greeting the day can seem a mission impossible. What causes this lethargy? Now, there's something going on there, and I hope you can see it. Look at that last sentence. Do you see the form of a question there? So that's always a good way to get going if you want to start with a question, but be careful. Make sure it's a question people have thought about. And my guess is every one of us, especially on cold mornings, it's like, I really don't want to get up. And it's hard to get that first step and get moving for the day. So it's a good question. It's a question that people have kind of batted around for a long time. Number 2 is one of my favorites. Behind its ivy-colored camouflage, American higher education is a fraud. Untrue to its students, untrue to itself. It has displaced moral truth with a mixture of values and forsaken reason for the trivial pursuit of relevance. So you read that and you go, okay, that's interesting. But there's a key word that should stand out to you there in the first sentence. What do you think? For me, it's that word fraud. And I'd like you to think about that word fraud. If you commit a fraud, are you in trouble? Well, it depends if you get caught, but let's assume you get caught. Are you in trouble? Yeah, a fraud is something that is punishable by the law. So look what this person is saying as they write this essay. American higher education, that's where you are right now. American higher education. It's where San Diego State is and Cal State San Marcos. That's what we're talking about, higher education. And it says it's a fraud, not just that, it hasn't done very well for the students. No, it's being called a fraud here. Now, if you start your paper with something that dramatic, you've got a reader's attention. Here's the big catch. I bet you know what I'm talking about here. By making that claim, you better be able to prove it. But I love an intro like that. That's like saying, watch this. This is a high wire act. It's like walking up 100 feet off the ground. You make a slip and you can really die. So this is a person that's really making a claim and saying, watch this. I'm going to try my balancing act and see if the person can pull it off. By the way, I also like the second half of that opener. It says, talking about higher education, has displaced moral truth with values and forsaken reason for relevance. I mean, do you hear the back and forth? We're going to be talking about style later on this semester. I think this is a beautiful example of style. One thing has disappeared and something else has come along. It's forsaken one thing and it's pursuing something else that this person doesn't think is valuable. So I love that. I think that's a very classy way of opening this. Number 3, you'll see it's a dramatic story, a very powerful story. I want you to read it, of course, and see what you think. But let me tell you a little background on number 3. Cheryl Smith is actually a lawyer, and she's going to the hospital to have a baby. Now, let me ask you, what do you think? Lawyers and doctors, do they like each other? Do they get along with each other? Probably personally, yes. But we're talking about lawyers and doctors. There's lawsuits and all sorts of clashes that can happen. So Cheryl was known in this town, and when she showed up, the doctors are going, uh-oh, we've got a lawyer here. So you'll see what happens. It's a pretty sad story here, but just think about that clash of doctors and lawyers. Number 4, I will let you mess with it, but I just want you to consider this is going to be an article about plants. Plants, just weeds and grasses and things like that. It's about plants. And I don't know about you, but I would have a hard time capturing anybody's attention to say, hey, I'm going to write you an article about plants. Wow, talk about a snoozer. But this person is trying something very interesting here that you might be able to try. So take a look at number 4. Number 5 sounds a little bit like number 3. It sounds a little bit like a story, but there's something different that's been added. So look at that one. Number 6. I want you to see something like number 2. Number 6, it says, once upon a time. Do you see the sentence starting there? And then it says the next sentence, but when? But today. So at one time, but today. Do you hear that back and forth? Okay. Number 7, see the quotation marks? We'll come back to that one later. Okay, so be thinking about good ways that you can get your paper off to a good start. There are so many ways. I want you to be creative. I want you to be imaginative. The worst way you can start is, I will tell you about. Oh man, that's just a killer. So see if there's something clever that you can get us going. And then the same thing applies to the conclusion. How do you get out of your paper? A lot of people say, well, I'll just summarize the points I made. Okay, that does work. It does get you out of the paper. If you're talking about climate change and you say, here are 3 contributing factors to climate change, that's what your whole paper is about. And at the end you said, well, here are the 3 factors that made climate change. Well, yeah, you can do that, but do you hear kind of the boredom building into that? So are there different ways that you can end your paper? You bet. Again, I won't do all of these. I just want you to be thinking about them. Look at number 1 on page 100. The Russians deserve the chance to shape their own destiny as individuals, to make their own decisions. The West can give them the tools, and sound money is the ultimate tool with which to shape a new, free-spirited, productive society. You may say, well, I don't know what's going on there. Well, it's not that hard. The person says, I'm going to tell you about the Russians. They're facing a lot of difficulties. But what does it say at the end? The West can give them. Does that mean it's happened yet? No. So this is a look to the future. This is a very popular way to end an essay. The West could help them out. And it says, if they do it, here's what you get. A new, free-spirited, productive society. So do you see that kind of shining goal out there, that shining image of what it could be like for them? So that's a really popular way to end essays. You can do that for almost any of your essays. You say, this is what may come about, for good or for bad. It might be either way, but it's a look to the future. I love that as a way to do the conclusion. How about number 2? The novelist Pat Conroy has observed that, quote, each divorce is the death of a small civilization. No one feels this more acutely than children. So remember how we talked at one time how you might want to start your paper with a quotation? Yeah, brainyquotes.com. Oh man, they've got so many. You can just type in good quotations. They're usually organized by topics. So then you just find something that's tying into what you want here. So this is different though, isn't it? The quotation is at the end of the essay rather than the beginning. Hey, why not? That's a good place to put it. People walk away from your essay thinking about what a nice statement that was. And that's a pretty powerful statement. Each divorce is the death of a small civilization. Mom and dad and kids, and the divorce has caused the death of that civilization. Okay, I need to help you a little bit on number 4. They're talking about Les Paul. Les Paul is the one that did electric guitars and made electric guitars popular for the rock and roll of today. So when he was a little kid, he was lying on the couch in his front room, and there were train tracks that went by pretty close. And one evening a train came by pretty fast and it kind of rumbled everything, and he put his hand up on the glass of the window that was right by the couch, And he could feel the vibrations of the sound as that train went by, and it made him think about vibrations and building up the sound, amplifying it. And that's how we ended up with the amps that we've got today, because of his work. So that's going to help you figure out what's going on in number 4. Anyway, so I'd like you to go through the rest of these and think about the way these people are pulling off conclusions. And when you get done, I'd like you to come up with fresh intros and fresh conclusions that are going to be imaginative and clever and make the reader appreciate you. Frankly, your ideas in your essay may not be all that great. I don't know. But if you can make a nice intro and a nice conclusion, people start feeling better about you as an author. So it's a good way to make your essay appealing to a lot of people. Okay, well, thanks. I hope this has been helpful.